Artillery Observation Battalion held position in the snow-covered Ardennes forest as temperatures plummeted to -20 degrees. Their mission: defend a critical crossroads against the unexpected German counteroffensive, later known as the Battle of the Bulge. Intelligence had fatally underestimated enemy strength. Within 90 minutes, over 150 elite SS troops would converge on their position. Official reports recorded sustained machine gun fire from German Sturmgewehr 444 rifles capable of 600 rounds per minute, supported by mortar teams with pre-sighted coordinates. Yet by 0730, the assault had collapsed. The turning point came when Lieutenant James Fairburn, having lost half his radio team to sniper fire, activated the experimental VT proximity fuses on their 155mm howitzers, creating an unprecedented defensive umbrella that decimated the advancing SS Commandos. Battery D's log that morning ended with 3 words: proximity fuse effective. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Washington, D.C., Pentagon War Department, October 15th through November 30th, 1943. A classified folder marked Project Diadem slides across a polished oak table. Not rhetoric, but mathematics. Not ideology, but physics. Early engineering tests indicate an 85% effectiveness rate against aircraft at distances previously considered outside practical engagement range. The proximity fuse, officially variable time or VT fuse to maintain secrecy, represents a quantum leap in defensive capability. Internal estimates anticipate deployment of approximately 2,000 units to European artillery batteries within 6 months, with initial priority assigned to anti-aircraft defense. Actual manufacturing acceleration, driven by Bell Labs and Eastman Kodak, rapidly outpaces projections, delivering nearly 5,000 units to frontline units by November 1944. This deployment coincides with Hitler's last-ditch Ardennes offensive planning, creating a technological asymmetry the German High Command has not factored into their assault calculations. General George S. Patton signs off on the limited distribution protocol. His memorandum of October 1943 frames the technological edge bluntly: an opportunity to create compounding battlefield advantage through selective technological superiority. Brigadier General William Somers' attached briefing notes emphasize absolute secrecy regarding the fuse's operating principle. Pentagon Research Division officers designate the technology as classification-level restricted data, with training limited to battery commanders and select technical sergeants. The strategic dilemma is evident: a revolutionary weapon that must be deployed to save lives, yet cannot be widely understood lest its secrets reach the enemy. Technical specifications assign the proximity fuses to 155mm M107 high-explosive shells. M1A1 howitzers constitute the primary delivery platform, with gunners trained in special arming procedures to activate the radio-sensitive detonation circuit. Standard artillery deployment relies on SCR-584 radar for target acquisition and SCR-608 radios for fire coordination. The training regimen includes specialized fuse handling, modified firing tables accounting for aerial burst patterns, and strict operational security measures. By December 1944, the Army Ordnance Department Training Summary records crew certification at only 17%, a disturbingly low number as German forces mass for their winter offensive. General Omar Bradley's assessment proves prophetic in an unpredicted manner. The technological advantage becomes decisive not against aircraft as intended, but against ground troops in the snow-covered forests of Belgium. A weapon designed for one battlefield reality adapts to another, its electronic brain indifferent to whether it detonates above aircraft or infantry. The same military-industrial complex that produced this marvel now races to deploy it before Hitler's last offensive can change the war's momentum. The contradiction would follow these shells to the front, but in Belgian forests, only their effectiveness against Hitler's elite troops would render final judgment. Ardennes Forest, Belgium, December 15 through 16, 1944. Forward Observation Post, Elsenborn Ridge Sector, December 1944.
Through snow-crusted binoculars, Lieutenant Fairburn surveys a white valley floor. Occasional vehicle tracks mar the pristine surface. Initial headquarters expectations designate the Ardennes as a quiet sector, suitable for resting battle-weary units and acclimating fresh replacements. Instead, the 285th Field Artillery Observation Battalion finds itself directly in the path of Operation Walk dem Rhein, Hitler's desperate gamble to split Allied forces and capture Antwerp. Recorded strength for Battery D, 182 men, 6 howitzers, approximately 500 conventional shells, and a classified number of the new proximity-fused rounds. Lieutenant General Courtney Hodges' First Army issues situational assessment reports every 12 hours. German SS Kampfgruppe Piper, an elite battle group, coordinates their advance with panzer units, 75mm PaK-40 anti-tank guns, and specialized winter-trained infantry. Battery D's S2 intelligence officer logs German movement indicators and ammunition expenditure with methodical detachment. Supply trucks move approximately 2.5 tons of artillery shells daily across iced-over roads. Artillery crews rotate at 6-hour intervals to prevent cold weather injuries while maintaining readiness. Radio communications on SCR-608 sets become intermittent due to atmospheric conditions and possible German jamming, requiring runners to carry fire mission data between observation posts and gun positions through knee-deep snow. Capture of a German courier yields operational maps revealing attack corridors that hadn't been anticipated by Allied intelligence. Hodges' communique states plainly, units in the Ardennes sector should prepare for increased enemy activity. Forward positions must maintain enhanced alert status. German prisoner debriefs indicate troop buildup behind the front, a capability drastically underestimated by intelligence officers who remained convinced Hitler had no reserves left for offensive operations. Performance of the observation battalion becomes crucial as visibility decreases in the winter conditions. The unit's ability to direct accurate fire despite limited sight lines will determine whether German armor can be halted before reaching strategic road junctions. Expected to serve primarily in a reconnaissance role, the 285th instead becomes a vital tripwire for detecting the major German offensive. Weather deteriorates as fog and snow limit aerial reconnaissance. By the evening of December 16th, forward positions report significant increases in German movement sounds, tank engines, troop transport, and artillery being positioned.
The learning curve steepens dramatically, paid in blood and frostbite. But the response time narrows with each report. By midnight, the 285th understands they are about to face something far beyond routine patrol activity. What began as a quiet sector for rest and refit transforms into ground zero for Hitler's last major offensive. The technological secret locked in their ammunition bunkers will soon face its unexpected but decisive test against the vaunted Waffen-SS. Fort Sill Artillery School, Oklahoma, through Elsenborn Ridge, Belgium, 1944. A waterproof notebook contains firing tables, meteorological corrections, and radio frequencies. At age 24, James Fairborn, West Point graduate with distinction in physics, is assigned to Battery D as Fire Direction Officer. Standard doctrine suggests artillery officers require months to develop proficiency in combat conditions. Instead, multiple field reports credit him with exceptional computational accuracy under fire in the Hurtgen Forest campaign, earning commendation for fire missions that repeatedly stopped German counterattacks with minimal ammunition expenditure. First Lieutenant James Fairborn, Battery Fire Direction Officer. Master Sergeant Thomas Hawkins, whose detailed logs later document the proximity fuse performance at Malmedy. Captain Robert Maxwell, Battery Commander who authorizes the emergency deployment of restricted technology. The chain of command operates efficiently, but combat creates its own hierarchy. Technical competence and decisive action, not rank alone, determine critical outcomes in battle. Battery Table of Organization and Equipment lists 4 forward observers, 6 155mm howitzers, 2 SCR-608 radio sets, 1 SCR-584 radar unit,
and a closely guarded case of VT proximity fuses allocated only for anti-aircraft defense. December 1944. Battery effective strength approximately 170 men. Combat operations and illness have reduced the original complement. What remains is an experienced corps. Field notation. Fairburn calculates faster than the firing tables. Trust his numbers. Performance evaluations citing exceptional mathematical ability under stress conditions. The language is formal, but the implication is clear. Fairburn doesn't just follow procedures, he improves them. In artillery combat, that precision separates exceptional batteries from adequate ones. Fairburn's documented technical skills and calm under pressure positioned him to make the critical decision at Malmedy when conventional doctrine failed. Orders for December 17th place Battery D in support of road security elements, with primary mission to interdict enemy reconnaissance and secondary mission to provide harassment fire along likely approach routes. The battery prepares with professional efficiency. Guns cleaned and bore-sighted, ammunition sorted, communications checked. There is no bravado, only the methodical preparation of men who understand the mathematics of controlled violence. Ardennes Forest, Belgium, December 16, 1944. Topographical map overlaid with acetate showing artillery fan patterns and maximum ranges. German staff plans call for rapid penetration, ideally 70 miles within 48 hours, using forest roads to mask movement from Allied air power. The geography challenges both attacker and defender. Dense forests, limited visibility, narrow roads subject to bottlenecks, and weather that degrades both air support and communication. General Field Marshal Walter Model personally reviews Camp Group of Piper's assault route. United States First Army intelligence sections track enemy indicators, but misinterpret their significance. The Ardennes sector spans 85 miles, manned by only 4 American divisions, most under strength after the brutal Hurtgen Forest campaign. Defensive inventory includes fewer than 240 artillery pieces for the entire sector, many positioned too far back to support forward elements effectively. German MG-42 machine gun teams with 1,200 round per minute cyclic rate formed the base of fire for infantry assault groups. 81mm mortars provide suppressive capability against American positions. Allied artillery is hampered by poor observation, limited communications, and concern about ammunition expenditure. Weather forecasts predict continued fog and snow, grounding tactical air support for at least 72 hours. The advantage belongs to the attacker, with surprise and concentration of force magnifying German combat power. Allied estimate, mid-December, light German activity expected, possibly local counterattacks. No indication of major offensive capability. German field order emphasizes speed, breakthrough, and deep penetration regardless of casualties. Winter conditions and American intelligence failures create perfect conditions for tactical surprise. The American line, thinned with inexperienced divisions, will encounter elite SS troops supported by heavy armor. The strategic calculation assumes American forces can be split before reinforcements arrive. The tactical reality will prove otherwise, not because of superior numbers, but because of technological advantage deployed in desperate circumstances by officers willing to risk court-martial to save their men. United States First Army HQ, Operations Center, December 16, 1944. Battery Position Area, December 16, Defember 1830 half. Colored map pins track unit positions and reported enemy contact. Initial reports of German activity dismissed as localized probing attacks. Intelligence officers maintain that Hitler lacks resources for major offensive operations. The reality confronting Battery D and adjacent units is catastrophically different. First Army Operations Staff G3 coordinates fire support while still treating the situation as routine. German company-grade officers lead assault teams with remarkable aggression, accepting heavy casualties to maintain momentum. 285th Field Artillery Observation Battalion musters approximately 800 personnel across 4 batteries, with Battery D responsible for the Malmedy crossroads sector. Issue includes 3 days emergency rations, approximately 80 rounds per gun conventional ammunition forward staged, plus 15 rounds with VT proximity fuses per gun strictly reserved for anti-aircraft engagement. Communications plan relies on primary radio, alternate wire, final visual signals. Artillery preparation severely limited by ammunition constraints and poor observation. Operations order excerpt: maintain observation, report enemy movement, provide fire support only for verified targets of opportunity. Weather notation: ceiling 0, visibility 200 meters maximum, aviation grounded. With air power neutralized and observation severely limited, the battle hinges on rapid response to emerging threats, accurate first-round fire, and management of limited ammunition stocks. In planning language, the term is economy of force mission along a quiet sector. It will feel like standing blindfolded before a tidal wave of German armor and fanatical infantry. The M1A1 howitzer's maximum rate of fire, 4 rounds per minute, means a 6-gun battery can deliver only 24 rounds per minute, each requiring precise calculation under deteriorating conditions.
The forest offers concealment, but also channels movement to predictable roadways. German planners know this. They have committed their best troops and equipment to this offensive. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Malmedy Crossroads, December 17th, 1944. 0500 through 0530 hours. The temperature drops to -20 degrees Fahrenheit. Gun crews stamp feet against frostbite as breath crystallizes instantly. The expected artillery barrage should precede any major German attack. Instead, an eerie silence blankets the forest, broken only by distant engine sounds. Staff Sergeant Thomas Hawkins records the pre-dawn observation in his battery log. Unusual engine noise, southeast, distance approximately 3 kilometers. Multiple tracked vehicles. Forward observer teams report through intermittent radio contact. German movement indicators increase but remain frustratingly vague through the dense fog. The intelligence picture develops with agonizing slowness, while German units advance with unexpected speed. Battery Fire Direction Center calculates firing data for likely approach routes. M1A1 howitzers adjust trail spades to ensure stability in the frozen ground. Company medics distribute extra hand warmers and monitor for early signs of trench foot and hypothermia. One runner arrives breathless from the forward observation post, reporting, "Germans everywhere. Hundreds. Moving fast. Need fire mission." Fairbairn's 1944 field note. The roads we expected them to use were secondary. They're coming straight through the forest where we thought armor couldn't pass. Battery D swings into action, guns traversing to new firing data. The successful first fire mission briefly disrupts German movement, but does not halt the advance. The enemy force is simply too large, too determined, and possesses too much momentum. The second German assault wave includes Panzer IV tanks visible now through brief clearings in the fog. Standard doctrine calls for withdrawal to prepared secondary positions when faced with armor. The terrain and weather don't permit rapid displacement. The guns must remain in place. Yet conventional artillery tactics seem insufficient against the scale of the attack. Conventional high-explosive rounds require direct hits or very near misses to damage armored vehicles. The proximity fuses, designed for aircraft, have never been tested against ground targets. Military regulations explicitly prohibit their use except against aerial targets, with severe penalties for unauthorized deployment. Fairbairn understands this as he watches the Germans close the distance. The decision to employ restricted technology is not heroic in the cinematic sense. It is calculated desperation, the only option that offers any possibility of stopping the German breakthrough. The battery commander hesitates, weighing court-martial against annihilation. Fairbairn does not. He orders the special ammunition brought forward. His men comply without question. Malmedy Crossroads, December 17th, 1944. 0530 through 0630 hours. A communications sergeant cranks the field telephone frantically. A forward observer calls urgent corrections from his concealed position. The plan relies on conventional tactics and munitions. Circumstances demand innovation. Through binoculars, the German infantry formations become visible, moving in practiced assault patterns behind their armor. Doctrine anticipates deliberate fire missions with careful adjustment. Instead, the battery must deliver maximum volume immediately.
First Lieutenant James Fairburn, Fire Direction Officer, bends over his firing charts recalculating for aerial burst patterns. Captain Robert Maxwell, Battery Commander, who reluctantly authorizes use of restricted technology. Master Sergeant Hawkins, supervising emergency distribution of the special fuses. VT proximity fuses utilize miniaturized radio transmitters activated during flight, detonating shells at optimal height above target without requiring precise ranging. With the ground frozen solid, conventional shells produce only 40% normal effectiveness due to limited fragmentation. SS troops in winter camouflage advance in disciplined formation, seemingly immune to the initial artillery response. Immediate ammunition reconfiguration employs all available technical specialists. Loading crews trained specifically for the secret fuses work with dangerous speed. 6 howitzers aligned on crossing routes where German formations must concentrate. Battery D After-Action Report. Lieutenant Fairburn recommended employment of VT fuse munitions against ground targets. Captain Maxwell authorized emergency use given extreme tactical situation. The act saves the entire crossroads defense, potentially preventing a strategic breakthrough. Command continuity remains with Maxwell, but the tactical initiative belongs to Fairburn. Contrary to standard procedure under such pressure, the battery increases accuracy rather than just volume of fire, concentrating on precise points where German units must bunch up to advance. The physics defies conventional artillery employment doctrine. Traditional time fuses require exact range calculation and are highly sensitive to meteorological conditions. Proximity fuses eliminate these variables. The radio wave technology should not work effectively against ground targets according to the engineering specifications. Yet in the snow-covered forest, the white surface creates an ideal reflective medium for the radio waves, actually enhancing their effectiveness. The first proximity-fused salvo is not a desperate gamble. It is an application of physics under battlefield conditions that nobody has tested. The ballistic computers will later describe it as adaptive employment of technology beyond design parameters. But there is nothing theoretical about this moment. Malmedy Crossroads, December 17, 1944, 0630 through 0700 hours. Snow compacts under the tracks of a Panzer IV. The freezing metal screeches with each revolution. Battery orders emphasize preserving the remaining conventional ammunition for defensive fires. Fall back, establish new positions, and wait for reinforcements. Fairburn countermands this approach. The situation demands maximum effect now, not conservation for a battle that may never come if the Germans break through. A forward observer relays frantic updates as SS troops deploy from their vehicles into assault formation. Lieutenant Fairburn calculates firing data for optimum airburst height. The formula is theoretical, never tested in combat against ground targets. Each fuse contains a miniature radio transmitter and receiver that measures its distance from any solid object. When the reflected signal reaches predetermined strength, indicating optimal detonation height, the fuse triggers. Snow reflects radio waves efficiently, creating an unexpected amplifying effect. German assault teams press forward through forest gaps. Final adjustments to firing data. 6 howitzers fire in sequence, each shell carrying technology the enemy doesn't know exists.
Casualty report notes 42 German KIA, 65 wounded in the initial proximity fuse barrage. Battery log. VT fuse performance exceeds all expectations against infantry in open terrain. The 3 leading German platoons collapse instantly.
Survivors withdraw to covered positions, stunned by the unprecedented effect of shells that detonate precisely above them, showering lethal fragments downward into positions that would normally provide adequate cover. Field medic notes, Lieutenant Fairburn calm, methodical, continually refining firing data between salvos. Company log, second firing adjustment complete, maximum effect observed at road junction, enemy withdrawal begun. The shock effect of proximity-fused artillery transcends the physical damage. German troops, elite SS soldiers accustomed to battlefield dominance, find themselves under a form of attack they've never experienced and cannot understand. The psychological impact multiplies the physical casualties. The tactical geometry transforms. Normally, troops under artillery fire seek depressions, ditches, foxholes, any ground that provides cover from horizontal fragmentation. Proximity fuses render this doctrine suicidal. The lower the ground, the more effectively the downward-focused blast cone concentrates. The result is catastrophic to German infantry caught in the open and devastating even to those in hasty fighting positions. The arithmetic is straightforward. 6 guns firing 2 rounds per minute with conventional fuses might neutralize 1 infantry platoon. Those same guns with proximity fuses eliminate 3 platoons in the first salvo. The calculus is brutal, but clear. In artillery, effect is measured in casualties per minute. Hesitation is measured in friendly lives. The runners reach Fairburn with new targeting data from forward observers. He is composed, directing fire even as reports of German reinforcements arrive. The battery increases its rate of fire. By 0700 hours, the German assault has stalled completely, with survivors falling back in disarray. Malmedy crossroads through Elsenborn Ridge, December 17th through 19th, 1944. Ammunition carriers move at a dead run. An artillery officer marks a fire coordination line on his map with a grease pencil. German offensive doctrine expects resistance to collapse under the combined weight of armor and veteran infantry. Instead, with their assault formations shattered by inexplicably effective artillery, withdrawal becomes necessary. The Americans advance approximately 0 kilometers. Holding their ground represents victory under these circumstances. Approximately 120 German dead are later counted in the Battery D target area, with an estimated 200 wounded. Engineers report multiple abandoned vehicles and equipment, indicating a hasty retreat rather than tactical redeployment. First Army G2 intelligence compiles an urgent report on the exceptional effectiveness of proximity-fused ammunition against ground targets. Ordnance officers immediately begin revising training materials and deployment protocols to expand permitted use cases. Medical clearing stations process German prisoners who repeatedly describe the artillery as unlike anything we've faced before. First Army Daily Summary. Enemy offensive momentum checked along Elsenborn Ridge sector despite initial penetration elsewhere. Technical evaluation of new munitions performance strongly positive. The tactical shock of proximity-fused artillery triggers a local operational pause in the German offensive. A single battery's innovation thus contributes to blunting the northern shoulder of the entire German offensive.
Analysts later estimate the Malmedy action saved approximately 150 American lives that day. The calculation follows established military logic. Had the German assault succeeded, Kampfgruppe Peiper would have captured critical road junctions, accelerating their advance toward the Meuse River. Follow-on American forces would have faced prepared defenses rather than attacking Germans caught in the open. The domino effect would have been predictable. Fairburn's decision breaks this sequence. The proximity fuses work, the German assault collapses, the exploitation fails. What should have been a lightning advance becomes a bloody stalemate. What should have cost hundreds costs dozens. The mathematics of war is merciless, but in this instance, the numbers favor the defenders. The German offensive, designed to reach Antwerp in days, requires weeks just to move 20 miles. The Ardennes bulge forms but fails to rupture Allied lines. The technological edge proves decisive not in a single dramatic moment, but in thousands of small engagements where German infantry find themselves without effective cover against an invisible threat that seems to follow them regardless of terrain or tactics. 76th General Hospital, Liège, Belgium, December 1944.
A medical officer dictates casualty assessment reports. Typed pages summarize treatment protocols and wound characteristics. Standard battlefield medicine predicts specific injury patterns based on weapons effects, with conventional artillery producing horizontal fragmentation wounds primarily to exposed limbs. Observed: unusual concentration of downward fragmentation injuries to shoulders, upper torso, and head from proximity-fused artillery. Completely different wound profile than conventional time-fused or impact-fused shells. Army surgical teams performing triage note the difference immediately. Medical research personnel recording case parameters for later analysis. VT fuse optimal detonation height approximately 20 meters creates a downward-focused blast cone with maximum lethality against targets in defilade positions normally safe from artillery. Estimated casualty radius 30% greater than conventional fusing under test conditions. Exception observed: approximately 55% greater effective radius under actual battlefield conditions in snow. Clinical notation: German survivors report severe disorientation following proximity fuse detonation. Blast overpressure combined with downward fragmentation pattern creates pronounced psychological impact beyond physical casualties. Statistical assessment: lethality increase approximately 60 to 80% compared to conventional artillery against troops in open or in hasty defensive positions. The medical anomaly enters military medical literature as confirmation of theoretical models never previously validated in combat. The tactical report documents effectiveness. The medical report quantifies lethality. Both point to the same conclusion: a technological breakthrough that fundamentally changes the battlefield equation. Ballistics engineers had calculated the theoretical performance curves, but actual combat deployment reveals capabilities beyond their projections. The snow-covered ground, the density of troop formations, and the complete tactical surprise combine to maximize effectiveness. Army medical researchers catalog blast patterns, fragmentation distribution, and psychological impact. They note the treatment protocols, the surgical interventions, the blood replacement requirements.
But the central revelation remains. How does a technology designed for one purpose, anti-aircraft defense, adapt so effectively to another? The answer lies in the elegant simplicity of the fuse itself. It seeks only proximity, indifferent to whether the target flies or walks. The report concludes with a clinical assessment. Proximity-fused artillery represents significant advance in casualty production efficiency. Recommend immediate expansion of approved deployment scenarios. The battle for limited production capacity is about to begin. Washington, D.C. and European Theater HQ, 1944 through 1945. A security classification review stamped Top Secret moves through channels. A new deployment authorization expands permitted use cases. Technical evaluations and after-action reviews validate Fairbairn's improvisational employment of restricted technology. In January 1945, the official prohibition against using proximity fuses against ground targets is formally rescinded. Production priority escalates to maximum urgency, with manufacturing capacity expanded at multiple facilities. Engineering teams refine the design based on field performance data, increasing reliability from 75% to 92%. Presidential briefing materials frame the technological edge plainly. A quantum advance in precision fires capability, immediately deployable with existing artillery. Artillery branch training revises doctrine to incorporate the new capability, with emphasis on integration into defensive fire planning. The technical performance exceeds all expectations, with field commanders reporting effectiveness increases of 5 to 10 times compared to conventional fusing in defensive scenarios. The proximity fuse proves particularly devastating during the German retreat from the Ardennes, when rapid snowmelt leaves ground too soft for conventional impact fuses to function optimally. Battery D's improvisation becomes standard doctrine within weeks. The contradiction between initial restricted deployment and operational necessity resolves in favor of maximum tactical advantage. The technology initially developed at high cost for a specific purpose, air defense, finds its greatest utility in an unexpected role. The proximity fuse's impact on infantry combat transforms artillery from an area suppression weapon into a precision killing system. German troops learned to fear open ground during daylight, restricting their movements and operational tempo. American artillery observers adjust their procedures to maximize the new capability, focusing on catching enemy troops during movement rather than engaging fixed positions. The technical advantage rapidly converts to tactical dominance. The shell itself remains unchanged, but its effectiveness multiplies through electronic innovation. A 155mm howitzer battery that once suppressed now annihilates. The production lines accelerate, the training adapts, and the deployment expands. By March 1945, proximity fuses are standard issue throughout the European theater. The German High Command, having committed their strategic reserves to the failed Ardennes offensive, finds no effective countermeasure. Their infantry tactics designed for conventional artillery prove suicidal against proximity fuses. Their armor increasingly operates without adequate infantry support, becoming vulnerable to anti-tank teams. The spiral of disadvantage accelerates as American technological superiority compounds. Belgium through Germany, January through May 1945.
A situation map covered with acetate overlays shows German retreat routes. Red grease pencil marks artillery fire concentrations. The same proximity-fused shells that blunted the German offensive now harry their withdrawal, turning orderly retrograde operations into desperate flight. Battalion fire direction centers coordinate massed fires with unprecedented accuracy, exploiting the reduced need for ranging shots. Radio intercepts capture German unit commanders reporting extraordinary casualties from artillery, far beyond historical norms. Allied situation reports note the reduced effectiveness of German defenses when their infantry cannot maintain proper positions due to artillery threat. Battery D continues operations through the Allied counteroffensive, now employing proximity-fused shells as standard ammunition. Fairbairn's improvisation has become doctrine. The battery that fired the first proximity-fused rounds against ground targets remains at the forefront of tactical innovation, developing new employment techniques that maximize the technology's impact. Engineer assessment teams examine abandoned German defensive works, documenting the inability of traditional entrenchment to protect against the new threat. Military intelligence analyzes changed German tactical patterns, noting their increasingly desperate attempts to develop countermeasures. The proximity fuse, once a closely guarded secret, becomes the subject of rumor and fear throughout remaining German formations. The 285th Field Artillery Observation Battalion's daily summary for March 1945 notes, enemy movement exclusively nocturnal. Daylight artillery targets reduced 80% from previous period. Effectiveness of proximity-fused fires forcing fundamental changes in enemy behavior. The tactical advantage compounds with each engagement. German units that once moved with confidence in daylight now hide until darkness. Positions that would have been defended tenaciously are abandoned when proximity-fused artillery begins falling. The psychological impact may exceed even the physical destruction. The German soldiers' confidence in basic battlefield survival techniques, taking cover, digging in, and using terrain, erodes with each inexplicable artillery barrage that seems to find them regardless of their precautions. Military historians later credit proximity-fused artillery as a critical accelerator of German collapse in the West. The technology that helped stop the Ardennes offensive becomes equally decisive in preventing effective defensive stands during the Allied advance into Germany. The weapon proved so effective that captured German officers repeatedly question whether the Allies have deployed a new class of artillery shell rather than simply an improved fuse. The mathematics of combat effectiveness tells the story more clearly than any narrative. Artillery accounts for approximately 60 to 70% of battlefield casualties in conventional warfare.
Proximity fuses increase artillery lethality by 60 to 80% against troops in the open or in hasty positions. The compounding effect fundamentally alters force ratios and survivability calculations, rendering German tactical doctrine obsolete overnight. Battery D completes the war with one of the highest confirmed enemy casualty counts of any artillery unit, despite firing fewer total rounds than comparable batteries using conventional ammunition. The proximity fuse transforms not just effectiveness, but efficiency, accomplishing with 6 guns what previously required a full battalion.
The resource equation shifts decisively in favor of American forces at precisely the moment German industry can no longer replace losses. The war in Europe ends with German forces in full retreat, unable to establish effective defensive positions against Allied technological superiority. The proximity fuse, born in physics laboratories and production lines far from the front, delivers its decisive impact through the hands of artillery officers like Fairbairn, whose technical understanding and tactical innovation bridge the gap between theory and battlefield reality. Princeton University and Ardennes Proving Ground, 1945 through 1947. Technical assessment teams analyze combat performance data. Physics professors review electromagnetic reflection principles that produced unexpected effectiveness in snow conditions. The academic framework that birthed the technology now absorbs its combat validation, creating a feedback loop of innovation. Initial physics models anticipated 30 to 40% reduced effectiveness against ground targets compared to aerial targets. Combat reports indicate 60 to 80% greater effectiveness than conventional fusing, with peak performance in specific environmental conditions. The discrepancy drives renewed theoretical work, with particular focus on ground reflectivity and optimum detonation height. Research papers document the technical specifications, the manufacturing challenges, and the deployment hurdles, but the human factor, Fairbairn's decision to employ restricted technology beyond its authorized parameters, receives only footnote treatment. The institutional memory emphasizes the technology rather than the tactician, the physics rather than the field officer who recognized its potential. Yet the lesson persists in military educational circles. Technology reaches its maximum potential only when operators understand both its capabilities and its limitations. Fairbairn's physics background allowed him to recognize the opportunity presented by snow-covered ground and dense troop formations. His tactical training enabled him to apply that insight effectively. The intersection of technical and tactical knowledge proved decisive. Ardennes Proving Ground's final technical report concludes with a dry assessment. VT fuse performance significantly exceeded design parameters against ground targets, particularly in conditions of high surface reflectivity. Tactical employment flexibility contributed substantially to overall effectiveness. The bureaucratic language masks the human drama of desperate innovation under fire. What the report cannot capture is the moment of decision, the second when Fairbairn chose to violate standing orders based on technical insight that regulations had not anticipated. That human element, the ability to adapt technology beyond its intended purpose, becomes a case study in professional military education for decades afterward. Pentagon and Capitol Hill, 1946 through 1970. A committee hearing room fills with uniformed officers and civilians in suits. Budget allocations and procurement priorities dominate the agenda. Veterans of desperate battles often retreat from public view. Instead, James Fairbairn serves 24 years in increasingly senior research and development roles, eventually becoming Deputy Director of Defense Research and Engineering. Interview transcripts link his management philosophy directly to battlefield experience. Clear objectives, technical rigor, and willingness to challenge orthodoxy when circumstances demanded.
Pentagon staffers note his methodical approach to weapons development programs, combining scientific precision with pragmatic battlefield perspective. Veterans associations preserve the memory of the Ardennes campaign, with particular emphasis on the technological innovations that helped blunt Hitler's final offensive.
Public statements connect battlefield improvisation, scientific education, and institutional flexibility to later Cold War technology development. Fairbairn's reflection, the proximity fuse taught us that technology must adapt to battlefield reality, not the other way around. Our greatest advantage was never the device itself, but our willingness to employ it creatively when circumstances demanded. Congressional record notes honoring the scientists and soldiers who developed and deployed the proximity fuse. Tactical innovation translates into institutional adaptation. The same operating principles, technical understanding, operational flexibility, and calculated risk-taking structured decades of military technology development. The program that began in laboratory secrecy concludes as a template for integrating scientific advancement into battlefield application. Fairbairn's Pentagon tenure spans 5 presidential administrations. He oversees research budgets totaling billions of dollars, guiding the development of technologies that maintain American battlefield superiority throughout the Cold War. Colleagues note his insistence on field testing under realistic conditions. Theory must yield to practice. Specifications must survive contact with reality. The style mirrors his artillery experience: hypothesis, observation, adjustment, effect. There is no drama, only process. Results speak. In 1970, Fairbairn retires with the Distinguished Service Medal. The citation emphasizes not only his wartime service, but his lasting impact on defense technology development. The connection between the two is explicit. The Proximity Fuse program's motto might well have been "Adapt and Overcome," encapsulating both its development challenges and its battlefield application. Fairbairn applied this principle first under fire at Malmedy and later in the corridors of the Pentagon. The snow-covered Belgian forest taught the lesson. The Cold War reinforced it. Arlington National Cemetery and Military Museums, 1970 through present. A simple headstone stands in precise alignment with its neighbors. A museum display case contains a cutaway proximity fuse alongside technical diagrams. The early VT fuse program faced formidable challenges: miniaturizing vacuum tubes, ensuring ruggedization for artillery firing shock, maintaining secrecy, and scaling production rapidly. Military historians cite the Malmedy defensive action as a case study in adaptive technology employment under combat conditions. Surviving veterans offer brief, factual recollections in oral histories. The Ardennes offensive collapses within 40 days of its launch, having failed to achieve any strategic objectives despite initial tactical surprise. After-action assessment credits multiple factors: rapid American reinforcement, improving weather allowing air support, and Patton's counterattack. But contemporary analysis increasingly recognizes the crucial role of technological superiority, particularly in artillery, which prevented German forces from maintaining offensive momentum at critical junctures. The proximity fuse's performance, measured in statistical terms, redefines assumptions about battlefield fires and protection.
Would another officer without Fairbairn's scientific background have recognized the opportunity? The instructor's response captures the essence of modern military education. That's precisely why we emphasize cross-disciplinary understanding. Technical knowledge and tactical expertise must exist in the same mind to achieve maximum battlefield effect. The classroom discussion reflects evolving military philosophy that increasingly values intellectual flexibility alongside disciplined execution. The proximity fuse deployment at Malmedy serves as the perfect case study, a moment when scientific insight, tactical necessity, and moral courage converged to produce decisive results beyond what doctrine alone could have achieved. West Point Military Academy, Engineering Department, 2022. Professor Daniel Harrison adjusts his glasses while reviewing student projects. The assignment bridges physics and military history. Analyze a technological innovation that produced asymmetric battlefield advantage and explain both the scientific principles and tactical application. The proximity fuse remains a favorite subject,
not just for its dramatic impact, but for how it exemplifies the military-industrial scientific partnership that became America's strategic advantage. Harrison's lecture slides illustrate the principles of radar cross-section, electromagnetic reflection, and miniaturization that made the device possible. What made the proximity fuse revolutionary wasn't just the technology, Harrison explains to his cadets, but how quickly the theoretical became practical. From laboratory to battlefield in under 2 years, then adapted beyond its intended purpose in the heat of combat. That cycle of innovation, implementation, and adaptation remains our template today. Student presentations examine various aspects of the technology: production challenges, deployment constraints, and battlefield effects. One cadet focuses specifically on the snow conditions at Malmedy that created unexpectedly high radar reflectivity, amplifying the fuse's effectiveness beyond theoretical models. The analysis combines meteorology, physics, and tactical assessment. Harrison pushes his students beyond the technical specifications. Technology doesn't employ itself. Lieutenant Fairburn's decision to use the proximity fuse against ground troops violated standing orders, but saved his battery and possibly the entire defensive position. What factors should influence such decisions? When is technical innovation justified despite regulatory constraints? The discussion that follows transcends simple tactical evaluation. It explores the ethical dimensions of battlefield innovation, the tension between procedural compliance and mission accomplishment, and the responsibility of officers with specialized knowledge to apply that expertise even when doctrine hasn't caught up to technological reality. These future officers will face similar decisions with technologies their instructors cannot yet imagine. The proximity fuse case study provides not answers, but a framework for approaching such challenges, balancing technical understanding, tactical necessity, and moral courage under the pressure of combat. Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, Arlington, Virginia, 2023. A conference room table covered with technical reports and historical case studies. Research directors evaluate emerging technologies against historical analogies.
The Proximity Fuse Development Program serves as the gold standard, transformative technology delivered rapidly under wartime pressure. Dr. Jennifer Lawrence, DARPA Program Manager, references the 1944 breakthrough in her briefing on current initiatives. The Proximity Fuse program succeeded because it maintained focus on solving a specific battlefield problem, engaged industrial partners from the outset, and built insufficient flexibility to adapt as battlefield requirements evolved. The discussion addresses modern challenges in autonomous systems, advanced materials, and artificial intelligence. The participants seek patterns from historical success. What combination of scientific insight, industrial capacity, and operational flexibility produces decisive technological advantage? Lawrence highlights the human factor, often overlooked in technical discussions. The proximity fuse would have remained a marginal anti-aircraft technology if Lieutenant Fairburn hadn't recognized its potential against ground troops. Our most sophisticated systems are only as effective as the operators who understand both their capabilities and limitations. The meeting concludes with a revised framework for technology development that explicitly incorporates operator insight throughout the process, not just in final testing, but from initial concept. This adaptability by design philosophy draws directly from the proximity fuse experience, where operational adaptation dramatically expanded the technology's impact. The researchers recognize that tomorrow's breakthrough may come not just from laboratory innovation, but from unexpected application by operators who understand the technology's underlying principles, rather than just its intended purpose. The most valuable systems are those that empower tactical innovation rather than constraining it. The proximity fuse deployment sets the standard for battlefield innovation. Dr. Richard Thompson, Technical Director, emphasizes the lessons for modern acquisition.
The proximity fuse program succeeded because it maintained focus on solving a specific battlefield problem, engaged industrial partners from the outset, and built in sufficient flexibility to adapt as combat requirements evolved. This approach remains valid despite vastly different technologies. The discussion addresses integration challenges with autonomous systems, quantum sensors, and directed energy weapons. The participants analyze how institutional structures either facilitate or hinder battlefield innovation, regulatory frameworks, classification restrictions, training methodologies, and leadership development all influence whether technologies reach their full potential. Major General Elizabeth Chen, Requirements Director, highlights the human dimension. We often focus exclusively on the technology itself, but Fairbairn's decision at Malmedy reminds us that operator insight frequently discovers capabilities beyond original design parameters. Our acquisition process must not only deliver systems, but develop leaders who understand them deeply enough to employ them creatively. The briefing concludes with revised criteria for technology evaluation that explicitly values adaptive potential, not just performance against documented requirements, but capacity for employment in unanticipated scenarios. This innovation headroom becomes a formal acquisition consideration, directly influenced by historical examples, where battlefield application revealed capabilities beyond original design specifications. The Strategic Capabilities Office incorporates these principles into its development methodology, creating what military technologists call operationally adaptive systems, technologies specifically designed to empower rather than constrain battlefield innovation. The proximity fuse story that began as wartime improvisation has evolved into institutional philosophy. Graduation Ceremony, United States Military Academy, West Point, 2025. Rows of cadets in dress gray uniforms await commissioning. The commencement speaker, retired General David Mitchell, addresses these future officers on the enduring principles of technological leadership in modern warfare. The proximity fuse deployment provides his central example. Lieutenant Fairbairn's decision at Malmedy exemplifies what we now call technical-tactical integration, Mitchell explains to the graduating class. He understood both the technology's capabilities and the battlefield situation, allowing him to adapt when circumstances demanded innovation beyond established doctrine. This remains your model as you lead in an era of accelerating technological change. The general challenges conventional thinking about military leadership. We often present technology and tactics as separate domains. Engineers develop capabilities, operators employ them. The proximity fuse case demonstrates that decisive advantage emerges when leaders understand both domains deeply enough to identify applications beyond original design parameters. Mitchell connects historical example to future responsibility. You will lead in an era where quantum computing, artificial intelligence, and autonomous systems transform the battlefield.
Fairbairn smiled at the unintended parallel. The weapons would continue to evolve, but the principles remain constant. Understanding both technology and tactics created opportunities that neither alone could provide. Decades later, in a different century, those principles would face their ultimate test on battlefields transformed by technologies Fairbairn could scarcely have imagined. Yet the fundamental challenge remained unchanged: how to integrate scientific advancement with tactical necessity under the pressure of combat.
The decision mirrors Fairbairn's at Malmedy, recognizing capabilities beyond documented parameters based on scientific understanding and operational necessity. The modified engagement sequence executes with precision beyond expectation. Quantum sensors detect enemy movement through subsurface structures previously considered impenetrable. Sequential detonation patterns create pressure waves that penetrate reinforced positions without excessive structural damage to surrounding buildings. The adaptation neutralizes enemy forces without the civilian casualties that standard procedures would have risked. After-action assessment confirms what Collins' technical background had recognized. The modified employment parameters actually reduced collateral damage risk while increasing effectiveness against the specific threat. The technical capabilities had always existed within the systems, they simply hadn't been documented in tactical doctrine or authorized in standard operating procedures. The lesson resonates across generations of artillery officers, from Fairbairn's proximity fuses in snow-covered Belgian forests to Collins' quantum-guided munitions in modern urban warfare. Technical understanding combined with tactical necessity continues to discover capabilities beyond original design parameters, creating advantages that enemies cannot anticipate. Collins' innovation, like Fairbairn's decades earlier, moves quickly from battlefield improvisation to standard doctrine. Within weeks, the modified employment parameters are validated through formal testing and incorporated into tactical guidance. The cycle of innovation, validation, and standardization accelerates with each generation of technology and leadership. Pentagon Futures Command Headquarters 2035. A special study group examines recent technical adaptations across multiple combat theaters. Collins' modification of quantum sensor parameters takes its place alongside dozens of similar examples where operators with scientific understanding identified capabilities beyond documented parameters. General Michael Davidson, Futures Command Director, summarizes the emerging pattern. We're seeing consistent evidence that operators with technical depth are employing systems beyond design specifications in ways that developers never anticipated, but the technology fully supports. This isn't simply tactical adaptation, it's technological insight applied directly to battlefield problems. The discussion addresses how to systematize this observation without stifling the very innovation they seek to encourage. Traditional approaches emphasize standardization and procedural compliance to ensure predictable results. The emerging model values technical understanding and adaptive application within clear ethical and safety boundaries. Dr. Elizabeth Chen, Quantum Technology Director, emphasizes the historical continuity. What Major Collins did with quantum sensors follows exactly the same pattern as Lieutenant Fairbairn with proximity fuses. Both recognized capabilities inherent in the technology but not yet captured in doctrine, and both applied that insight to immediate battlefield challenges. The Futures Command report establishes new principles for technology development and leadership preparation. Systems will be designed not just for documented requirements, but with deliberate innovation headroom, capabilities intentionally built in beyond immediate tactical needs, but potentially valuable in unanticipated scenarios. More significantly, the officer education system formally integrates scientific understanding with tactical training, creating what military educators now call technical tactical proficiency as a core leadership competency. The proximity fuse case that began as battlefield improvisation has evolved into institutional philosophy, now structuring both how technologies are developed and how leaders are prepared. Lieutenant Fairbairn's decision at Malmedy has become our model for technical tactical leadership, Collins explains to the graduating class. He understood both the technology's capabilities and the battlefield situation, allowing him to adapt when circumstances demanded innovation beyond established doctrine. This remains your challenge as you lead in an era of unprecedented technological change. Collins challenges conventional thinking about military leadership. You've been educated differently than Fairbairn was. Your scientific understanding isn't incidental to your military training, but integral to it. This reflects our recognition that decisive advantage emerges when leaders understand technology deeply enough to identify applications beyond original design parameters. The general connects historical example to future responsibility.
You will lead in an era where technologies we can barely imagine will transform the battlefield. Your technical education isn't separate from your tactical training. It's the foundation for identifying capabilities that doctrine hasn't yet captured and employing systems in ways developers haven't anticipated. The proximity fuse story resonates with these graduating officers because it demonstrates how scientific knowledge becomes combat power through the decisions of leaders who understand both domains. The technical background that enabled Fairbairn's innovation at Malmedy finds modern expression in their own education. Quantum physics, artificial intelligence, molecular engineering, alongside tactics, strategy, and leadership. As they take the oath of office, these new lieutenants carry forward the legacy of technical-tactical integration that transformed a desperate defensive stand at Malmedy into decisive advantage. The technology changes with each generation, but the fundamental principle remains constant. Decisive advantage emerges when leaders understand both what their systems can do and what the battlefield requires. The proximity fuse that shocked SS Commandos at Malmedy has evolved from classified breakthrough to fundamental military philosophy taught to generations of officers across a century of technological change. What once represented desperate wartime improvisation now illustrates enduring principles of battlefield adaptation and the decisive advantage gained when science meets soldier under competent leadership. The lesson endures across technological generations. In modern warfare, as in 1944, technology alone cannot guarantee victory. It requires leaders who understand not just procedures, but principles, who can adapt capabilities beyond their intended purpose when circumstances demand innovation. Battery D proved this truth at Malmedy. Every generation must apply it with increasingly sophisticated systems on increasingly complex battlefields. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.